Delighted to welcome to the podcast today, Ironman, come back from 2, possibly 3 knee injuries, a black belt in karate, and former junior captain of O'Connor, but more importantly, a good mate of mine. Carl Wallace, welcome to the podcast. How are we?
Hey lads, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thanks for joining us, Carl.
And yeah, for the intro, I haven't done my knee 3 times, only 2.
Well, we'll get into that because I know you had a bad injury with hurling as well. So but we won't delve on that too long. Can you tell us, for people that aren't aware, Carl, just a little bit of your background, I suppose, into sport, I guess, because I know you started off football being your first love.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, as you say, like football is, when I was growing up, my whole life I suppose surrounded football. It was yeah, started playing like every, I suppose, young guy, just wanted to try every different sport when I was growing up in school, whether it be football, hurling, Gaelic football, and yeah, just played, I suppose, in Joe's and in Sallynoggin for. I started when I was about 7 up until about, I suppose, under 17, under 18 years of age, and yeah, really enjoyed it, and lucky I was injury free really for that whole time, and yeah, like just enjoyed it, played a decent level, and I actually, our team broke up when we were under 17s, and I actually then I wanted to play golf, kind of focus on my golf for a year, and yeah, and then I went back to play football, and I actually joined Dan and a lot of the lads from school on Park Celtic, and yeah, and then I unfortunately had a really bad injury, knee injury, ruptured like ACL and lateral knee ligaments, and that kind of that brought up a whole kind of road to rehab and everything to try and recover from that. So it was, yeah, and it was a kind of a turning point, definitely, in my in the way I would approach sport.
And just before we move on to that injury specifically, so you mentioned golf there as well, and you also did a bit of karate growing up.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm actually a black belt in karate, and I would have done that in parallel with football all the way up, and that's something that I really enjoyed. So the karate black belt is something that when I look back, it's definitely something that when I look at my personality and everything that I do, whether it be in work or in my personal life, I would look back at a lot of those traits and things that I would have learned there. So whether it be self-discipline or everything in relation to karate, and like you would join karate just for fitness, but also learn how to defend yourself in self-defense. So that is something, as well as an individual sport, is something that the self-discipline and kind of focusing on that is something that I really enjoyed as well, in parallel to football.
Just so focus on the injury, because I was playing the day it was on in Meadowvale. So at that time you'd actually got back into football. You were enjoying again with Park Celtic. Taught me through the injury and then kind of that road to rehab, because you'd obviously just started in commerce with myself in UCD.
Yeah. So it was funny because we were actually had our debs on the following, I think it was Wednesday or Tuesday, and it was a Sunday morning. So going to the devs with an injury is not very fun. But yeah, to come back to your question on the day, so I would have played like left midfield or centre mid, and for whatever reason I was playing up front that day, and yeah, very simply the ball came over the top, and the keeper was running out. I flicked the ball. I won the ball as the ball was coming over, and the keeper just came in and tackled straight, or flew straight into my left knee, and like my knee was planted, and I went one way, my knee went the other, and yeah, my whole leg just completely blew up. Initially, I thought, like the snap, I would never wish it on anyone, like my worst enemy, in relation to sport. I think it's one of the worst injuries you can receive, and initially I thought my leg was broken. But then like I fell, and I looked down, and like it wasn't like hanging off as if you would see like a leg break. However, the knee just started to swell up. So it started to swell. We went into Vincent's Hospital, A&E, and I actually we didn't get an ambulance or anything, because we actually for whatever reason, we didn't get an ambulance. So my dad drove me into A&E, and when we went into Vincent's A&E, the consultant on call just lifted my leg up. So lifting my leg up, and the lateral ligaments are on the outside of your knee, and just she pushed like the bottom half of my leg and the upper half, and there was nothing there holding the bone. So, and even the consultant on call said like, oh wow, like, and even at that point I didn't realize how bad it was. We got an X-ray just prior to that, and it said that the leg wasn't broken, so, which I thought was good news at the time, which actually it turned out to be not. So from that point, it was strap it up, and I was to come back in the next day. So the Debs on the following day, went to the Debs, and then the following day after that, I had to go back into Vincent to see a consultant. And in the interim, I got an MRI scan. So an MRI obviously is showing up everything to do with your ligaments. And when I went back into Vincent's to see the consultant who would have done the surgery, and I've seen him a few times now, but he said like, this is a really, really, really serious knee injury. Like, it's like an injury that we'd see in a car crash, like really, really, really bad. And like, I was sitting there, and they basically said like, we're going to get you back to some level of sport, quote unquote. So in other words, walking or kind of jogging. And from this point, like, obviously I'm 18 years old. Sport is everything in my life at this point, and it's trying to figure out like, where do you go from here, and trying to digest the whole thing. It was really, really difficult, and it took a long time to really figure out what was next, and how to really handle the whole situation.
And did you have much anger towards the goalkeeper or towards yourself really, and getting the injury, or was it more just, oh, this is football at the end of the day?
Yeah, like in sport, injuries happen and these things happen. I think it was just a particularly bad injury. No, I don't hold any kind of anger or anything like that towards the team or the individual who did it. Like, these things happen, you know. I was just particularly unlucky, so no, it's, yeah, it is what it is. And yeah, it was more just trying to focus on the recovery and getting back. But it's just, I was so disappointed because it was just at that point, sport particularly was really, really everything I did, and you obviously can't do a huge amount with a ruptured ACL and lateral ligaments, and it takes a long time to rehab that. So yeah.
Yeah, and so tell us a little bit more about that rehab and what's involved. So obviously, it must have taken a while for you to get your head around. You know, you're obviously mentioned you're very sporty. To all of a sudden, I'm not able to play any sports. Talk to us a little bit more about that rehab and what was involved.
Yeah. So the surgery obviously happens, and so that was, I think it was a 5-hour surgery. And the interesting thing about the injury and why it was kind of more complex than as your standard ACL was the lateral ligaments are obviously the outside of the knee, and they are required for your knee to be locked in extension for 7 to 8 weeks, whereas the ACL, whenever anyone has had an ACL reconstruction, it's strange that pretty much like the day of the surgery or the day after, you're back walking again, because you need the leg to be moving. So it was a balance between having the leg locked in extension and then having the leg moving, because I had both injuries at the same time. So initially they thought they would have had to do 2 surgeries, do the ACL, wait for a couple of weeks, and then do the laterals. But luckily they were able to do it all in one. So for the first 8 weeks or so, my leg was locked in extension in a brace. So the rehab is really trying to keep the muscles moving, and keeping your kind of your everything around your knee, so your hamstrings, your quads, as strong as you possibly can when it's non-weight bearing, which is very difficult. And yeah, those 8 weeks were really testing. Because once you get beyond 8 weeks, your leg can come out of extension or out of the brace, and you start doing like walking toe touch with crutches, and then walking full weight with crutches, and then you're moving through the stages then. And then, yeah, like in fairness to the physio and St. Michael's Hospital in Dunleary, they were really good. The rehab program was roughly, that was, the injuries happened in October, and I didn't kick a ball until the following January. So it was about 14 months between injury and the rehab process. But yeah, it's a very long road, very mentally testing, certainly for anybody it was sport driven, to be kind of having that taken away from you, and you just have to go through the process. But yeah, so that in a nutshell, that was really it. And you just take each win as you go along. So after 8 weeks, then you start walking, and it's moving through it. But yeah, it's a long time to come back.
Did you receive much sort of therapy and mental therapy? Because obviously everyone knows the difficulties with an injury and in terms of getting your physical fitness back, but obviously your mental fitness takes a big break. Is that something that, you know, it strained your mental health at all, or did you just try and adapt to it?
No, definitely. To be honest, it was really difficult. The first couple of weeks initially was just trying to get your head around potentially not playing sport again, or just trying to walk again. I didn't receive any treatment in that sense. I was lucky that I had a great support system around me, so my family, and as I said, the physio and the doctors were all really, really great. And as Dan said, we just started college, so I had that distraction. So I suppose, yeah, I probably buried it. I didn't really acknowledge it. I had a couple of, so I think Dan's aware of this story, but I would have, Padraig Harrington came to my house, so that was a really big mental boost. Because I'm a keen golfer, and having someone like that come and give you some advice, and that was at a time, it was about 3 or 4 weeks after surgery, where I was kind of really struggling if I was on at that point. So to have someone like that give you a kind of pat in the back and keep going, that was certainly a pivotal point in time. But yeah, no, I didn't receive anything. I was lucky that I was just able to have a great support system.
Yeah, the last thing on that, I suppose, it must have been hard on the days when you were struggling and to motivate yourself to do the physio work, for example.
Yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, those are the days that you just have to just push through and keep going. And yeah, it was really difficult, like, thinking back. And yeah, you just have to follow the program and make the rehab part of your life and the part of your routine. So when you're getting up, you have to do these exercises, and yeah, like it was just making it a routine. And that was something that actually Padraig really instilled in me, or he really emphasized, was because he had previous knee injuries and so forth, and he was saying that you just need to have to make it part of your life every morning, every throughout the day, make it just regimental, or make a routine. But yeah, it was difficult at times, no doubt. But you just have to kind of keep going and push through.
And then so you came back and you played a bit of football, and I think you started playing golf again. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but then obviously a couple of years later you had the second knee injury, and that was playing Super League, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think you were there as well, Dan. I think you could have been there as well, so maybe you're a bad omen or something. No, but yeah, it was in Super League, and this time actually it wasn't a tackle. It was just, so in UCD, it was, I think it's on a hockey pitch, which again is terrible for for your knees or your joints. But yeah, I just took a shot, and I took a shot at my right foot, and I kind of left the ground as I was striking the ball, and when I landed on my left leg, and all the weight just went through my knee, and it just kind of buckled in, so kind of like pushed in, and At the time, I was like, oh, that feels really bad. But I was able to walk, and I walked it off, and it started to swell, and I was like, oh no, I think this. In my mind, I knew it was gone, but I just I was kind of ignorant to it, and I just tried to ignore it, which is a terrible idea. But because we were in final year at the time in college, and I just said, like, I don't want to go through the whole process again. I want to enjoy my final year, because it's weird. When you have an ACL injury, you're still able to carry on your day to day. You're able to walk. You're able to, like, you can't pivot at all. If you pivot, your knee will just buckle in. And that happened a few times over the course of the next 7 months or so. So I didn't go and get it seen to, which is a terrible thing. But after final year, I kind of said, look, I buckled in a few times. I knew it was gone, but I just wanted to go and get the confirmation to the doctor, who was my consultant again, the same consultant. And they do a series of checks with your ACL, which is essentially you sit on a plinth, and then they basically like push the bottom half of your knee or bottom half of your leg, and like hold the top half to check it, and to check if it's there. And there was nothing there. It was completely ruptured. And he said, yeah, that's gone. We're gonna have to repair it. So it was it was a couple of weeks after that then I got the second surgery. And at the first, they took a hamstring graft from my left leg and put it into my left leg. However, on the second time, they couldn't do it from the same leg, because they were afraid that if they took another hamstring graft in my left leg, it would potentially tear my hamstring. So they had to take it from my right leg and transfer it over. So they took the hamstring graft out of the right and put it into the left to make up the ACL. But so lots of war wounds and scars on my knees. But thankfully, it's been fine since.
Last thing on that. So what was that like, having gone through that before? You had that 7 months, like you mentioned there, where you couldn't really pivot, and you kind of knew there was something up, and then you go and get a scene to. Just wondering what's that whole process like, and then the realization after 7 months that, I understand I was in final year, but maybe I should have got a scene to. Yeah, well, talk us through to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, like I think I was that bit older at that point. So when I first did it, I was just in college, so I was not 19. This is about 3 years later. So I was that bit more mature, I suppose, and I was able to maybe handle the situation better than I did the first time. And I suppose it wasn't as traumatic or as the first time. So yeah, that process, it was actually, the rehab was much shorter the second time around, because it was just the ACL. It wasn't the laterals. When I say just the ACL, it's still a terrible injury, and it takes a long time to come back. But I was able to walk again after, so I was able to. I wasn't just trapped with a leg brace, and so I was able to kind of, have a routine and be as independent as you can be. So that was really, it wasn't as bad, in honesty. I knew what to expect. I knew the routine. The physio was the same that I had the second time around. So we focused in on it, to just to get it done. And I definitely rehabbed it a lot better the second time around than I did, I think, the first time. And it was a lot shorter, so that makes a lot of difference.
And after both those knee injuries, what gave you the motivation to start thinking about doing an Ironman?
Yeah, because when you do the ACL twice, and I was hemming and hawing on whether I'd go back and play football again, or any sort of sport. And I knew I couldn't really like throw myself in 100%, because there's always in the back of your mind, unfortunately, that if I commit to this tackle, or if could there be a potential that the knee could go again. So I just said, look, it was a really tough decision to say, I just can't play anymore. I need to focus my energy in somewhere that I know that somebody's not going to tackle me. So in triathlon, you don't have anyone, obviously, opponents that are, it's an individual sport. But yeah, so going from that, I needed to pour my energy and focus into other things, and pour my passion into for sport. And I still love football and I love to watch it, but unfortunately I just needed to focus on something else. And yeah, and that's where it led to that. And a few people at work had been doing this triathlon thing, and I was like, I didn't really understand. I didn't like. I done all three disciplines, like swimming, cycling, and running, but it's not to any length or distance. But I wanted to definitely check it out, and I was really curious, and I like the idea of the challenge of the Ironman, and how potentially like that's something that's so difficult to do, and it was something that a really kind of big a goal to set for 12 to 13 months ahead. I said, look, let's set that and shoot towards something, because I'll be fairly goal orientated anyway. So I needed something to kind of aim for, and then so then I started to train and kind of get stuck in.
I remember you telling me you were doing it, and it was obviously a fair few months away. I thought you were mad, not only to do it, and you could talk us for people that aren't aware of exactly what distances are involved in an Ironman, but you didn't even do the Cork one. You decided to go all out and go for the France and the blaring heat in the middle of the summer.
Yeah. No, a lot of people thought I was mad. I probably am and probably was, but like I had to. So the reason why we chose, I sat down with somebody, one of my mentors in work, who had done them previously, and we were like trying to pick a race that would give us enough time to train, but then also so Ironman Cork, I don't think that was scheduled for that year, because it was definitely something that I would have considered if it was. So Ironman Dunleary, or the 70.3, which is half the distance, was on actually that year. It was on actually the same day as I did it in France. So I wanted to pick something that gave me enough time, and that was August. So it was, and honestly, I didn't think about the heat. I didn't think about, it was just really the point in time was the big factor. And so it was picking that, and then basically making a plan back from that. And bearing in mind at this point, I'd never done a triathlon. I'd never ran like 10-15K was probably as long as I've ran. Swimming, I'd be a decent swimmer. I wouldn't have swam any great length. And then cycling, like it was again, it wasn't any long distance, but so it was definitely a challenge. So I set that goal in August, and I had to do a series of triathlons leading up to that, because I needed to figure that out and really understand what's involved, learn about the sport, and I did about 3 triathlons leading up to it, which gave me which gave me great experience and kind of great insight into what to actually do on the day. But so that was I suppose the thought process. Obviously not much, but yeah.
So obviously, for people that don't know, what are the distances involved, especially for the triathlon, and then moving into the bigger Ironman?
Yeah, so triathlon, as I said, is made up of it's a swim at the start, and then you do a cycle and then a run. So there's basically there's a lot of different distances and a lot of different types of triathlon. So you would have sprint, which would be the shortest, Olympic distance, which you would see if you follow the Brownlee brothers or anything in the Olympics, that would be that distance. Which is, so the sprint distance is, I think it's 750 meter swim, 20k cycle, and then a 5k run, I think. And then Olympic would be 1.5k swim, 40k bike, and then a 10k run. And then you have double Olympic, which is double that distance. And then from double Olympic, then you have half Ironman, or 70.3 Ironman, and then Ironman, full Ironman. So like it leads up to that, and the full distance Ironman is a 3.8 kilometer swim, 180 kilometer bike, and then a marathon, so 42.2 kilometer run, which is it's when you say it out loud, it sounds absolutely crazy.
Yeah, the only thing I remember from watching a few Olympic triathlons is one of the Brownlee brothers was struggling coming near the end of a race, and his older brother, I think, was behind him, and he actually pushed him along to the finish line. I just can't imagine after doing the swim, after doing the cycle, to then go and run a quick 5 or 10K or whatever it is, and the heat finally getting to you. Is that, like, obviously dehydration is probably something when you did it in France that was a big concern for you, was it?
100%, yeah, and like it's no joke. Like this is like serious stuff in terms of like heat stroke or anything like that. You know, in that heat, like in France, and where I did it in Vichy, which is a rural town in France, so no sea breeze or no nothing. It was 35 degrees heat at the height of the day. So like I'm pale skin and I'm Irish and we're not used to that heat. And a lot of the participants would have been Spanish, French, Italian, who would have been, I suppose, in some way used to that heat, particularly in training, whereas I just didn't train in that heat at all. There was a handful of Irish and a lot of actually English that would have been, I suppose, been in a similar boat as myself. But yeah, like the swim is fine because you start at 6 a.m. and you're not in the heat at all. But the bike, when you come off the bike come off the swim into the bike, it's all about the preparation to avoid dehydration. So you take salt tablets every hour on the bike to replace all the sodium that you're losing through your sweat. The whole idea is to try and keep the battery. It's this thing. It's trying to keep your energy levels high because you're burning so many calories. So you're eating bars and bananas and all this kind of stuff. And just in fairness, there was a lot of aid stations along the route of the bike. So you're checking into that every 30k or so. But yeah, like so you're trying to replace the electrolytes through you're getting that through each aid station. So yeah, it's a really difficult task to stay hydrated, but you have to take it at each aid station, and when you go into the run, then like it's kind of a lot. It's easier in a way because you've got crowds around you. You've got aid stations along every 5k along the route, so you're able to keep the hydration up. And they were spraying us with hoses and stuff as we were near the aid station. So it was welcome. But yeah, so that's really, to answer your question. That's really how to try and stay on top of it. Particularly the salt tablets are very important.
So just on the bike itself, I think you mentioned somewhere it was like 7 hours on the bike for itself. Did you get off it often for a break, or like what's involved? And you mentioned like you're going up and down these hills and there's no one there. Are there many cyclists around you, or is it a case that you're more or less on your own the whole way, and that the odd person might overtake the odd person, for example? Or
so the swim itself was an hour and a half, and then you go into the cycle. The cycle was definitely the toughest segment, all right. Like it was 360k loops. So yeah, and as you say, I think it was roughly about 2,000 meters of climbing. So at the start of each 60k, it was climbing. There's like everyone's in the same boat. It's you're spread out, so there is cyclists everywhere. But like you touched upon the heat of the day, like there was people on the side of the road after like falling off their bike, or they've got these tinfoil covers because of like people are just dropping like flies because of the dehydration. And that was the one thing that kind of worried me about the bike, was that's where the most, when it comes to triathlon, that's where the most things can go wrong, because you can either fall off your bike, you can get a puncture, your bike, and your chain can snap. There's a whole factors that you're trying to avoid, but unfortunately these things just happen sometimes. But thankfully everything was fine through the bike. And it was 7 hours, which is a really long time. Didn't like you don't stop. You kind of slow down as you go through aid stations to refuel or get more and more water on board. But you don't. You're against the clock, so you have to keep going. And there's a cutoff point between, if you don't hit a certain time, after you've done the swim and the bike, you actually can't do the run. They close it off, or they close off part of the bike course because they have to reopen the roads, and so you just keep going. You want to finish, so you have to. Yeah, there's no way of stopping.
So you get off the bike, your hard work's done. I know it's kind of like I'm making a small deal. You've done your 1.5 hour swim, your 7 hour cycle, so that's 8.5 hours, which is a long time. But you still have a marathon to do. Talk me through that little. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just because if I got there, fair enough. But how do you get yourself up for that marathon? So you just finished the bike. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so you come off the bike and you just cannot wait to get off this bike because you've been on it for so long. It's like a working day on a bike. So you get off the bike, and that was a huge win, obviously mentally. Like you're like, okay, that's 2 out of 3. And then we just got a marathon to run now, and that'll be fine. But no, absolutely not. But yeah, so you come into the second aid stage or the second transition area, and as I was coming in, and like there's a tent, and it was heaven. Like you sitting under the shade, and there was actually a French guy sitting next to me, and stupidly I didn't put sun cream in the second bag. So you've got 2 bags basically in transition 1 and transition 2. So transition 1, when you come out of the water onto the bike, you have to put on all your bike gear, and then the second transition bag is when you put on your running gear and take off your bike gear. And I didn't put in sun cream into my second transition bag, and I was like, I need to get sun cream or I'm going to really burn. So there was a French guy beside me, and he was like whacking on this like factor 50, like really great thick sun cream. I was like, oh geez, like, can I have some please? Like, I probably didn't say it like that, but I was probably exhausted. And yeah, like whacked it on, didn't think anything of it, and it was one of these sun creams that doesn't rub in at all, so it was like a ghost as I was going out into the marathon. But yeah, like it was ready to go. But like mentally, like you can't think about, oh, I've got a marathon to run, because it just becomes too much to bear and too much to think about. Because like I did the marathon in just under 5 hours of run, but it's about really breaking up the marathon into bite-sized chunks almost. And as I said before, there's a lot of people that are along the route of the run, so there's a great atmosphere, and as part of the run, it's a 4 10K loop essentially, and then you would run into, they have this really great arena, but at the end of each 10K loop is the arena, so you have to go through it basically 3 times before it's your turn. So you're seeing everybody run through, and they call your name. It's like, you're an Ironman, and then you're like, oh no, I have to go back around for another 10K until it's your turn. But yeah, like I had it was great atmosphere along the run, and as I said, you've got aid stations every, I think it's every 3 or 2.5K. So you're getting water on board. You're getting kind of hosed down, and to keep the temperature down. But so yeah, that it was definitely towards the I think we hit about 30K describe it. So in other words, it's all mental at that point. Your body is just completely, well, I was anyway. I'm sure there's people who are like professional and more kind of used to that level of distance endurance training, but I was completely broken after the 30K. So it was literally a case of just get through it, and you hit that wall, as they say, and a lot of people would say it, particularly marathon running. So you just have to get beyond that and really push through for the last 12K or so. But yeah, it was definitely a special feeling when you come into the end, and like this is the accumulation of like 12 to 13 months work and training, and a lot of training put into getting to this, to be able to do something like this. And like when you go underneath and they call your name, like, Carl Wallace, you're an Ironman, and you hear that, that's those you've been picturing in your mind when you're getting up at 6 a.m. to do swims in Dunleary, or going on long bikes up Sally Gap. That's what really, I suppose, motivates you to accomplish the goal at the end. And yeah, that was really cool, and be able to share that with my family, and it was a really special feeling.
And that's probably something that you probably didn't expect, that buzz again after those 2 knee injuries, and then to finally be able to put that all aside and then have that moment where they say you're an Ironman. Is that something that is probably looking back, something that you're extremely proud of, coming back from the injuries to get to that level again of fitness and endurance?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I need, as I said, I needed to replace my passion for football with something. And it just so happened to be triathlon and the Ironman. But yeah, it was definitely a special feeling knowing what I've had to go through in terms of rehabbing, from a sporting point of view, going through that process, to be able to, actually finish the Ironman and do it was a really special feeling. And yeah, like that all added to, I suppose, the satisfaction, 100%.
And just last thing so maybe talk a little bit about the training, because you mentioned the 6 a.m. swims. For people like myself that wouldn't be too familiar with what's involved in the training, you obviously got a program from someone. You're essentially training like a professional athlete.
Yeah, so there's a great website called Training Peaks. So I basically got a plan for a 24-week beginner Ironman plan, essentially what it is. So yeah, the training is it's basically your standard week would look like, you'd swim on a Monday, or it could be an off day, or maybe strength and conditioning, and that could be a kilometer, or depending on what stage of the training you're at. And you would peak obviously towards the end and taper off before the race. But you swim on a Monday, then you do a bike run training, which is basically what you described as brick training. So you do a short bike and then into a run. So getting used to that, coming off the bike into a run, which is a very different feeling than just running itself. Your legs are almost like your legs are like jelly when you come off the bike. So you do brick training on a Tuesday. Wednesday will be swim again. Thursday will be a slightly longer brick training. So it could be 20-25k, and then into a run. And then you do your long swim on a Friday morning. So it could get up to a 3k or 4k swim. And then you do your long bike on a Saturday morning. So like at the peak, you're doing about 100k cycle, and then you go into a short run after. So again, trying to make sure that you're maintaining that feeling of coming off the bike into the run. And then you do your long run on a Sunday. So that could be half marathon. I think I peaked up to about 30k, and then you taper off. So that's roughly how the plan would work. Now you wouldn't do 7 days every week. It could be 6 or 5, and it varies. But that roughly, how it works. You from the race working back 24 weeks. That's the block of training you need to put in. So it's a huge time commitment and a huge dedication you need to put into it. Like, it's not, you need to you need to train your body to be able to endure it, so to speak. So yeah, that's really the length of time.
And then for example, for the swimming, are you doing laps of a certain place, or are you swimming out to a buoy and turning back, or how does that work?
Yeah, like so I at the time when I started training, it would have been in February, so I couldn't get out into the sea. It was very cold, in kind of February, March, and it's pretty dangerous a lot of the time. So it was in pools majority at the time. So it was like a 25-meter pool, and it's just laps, and it's quite hard to replicate what you're going to feel in a pool when you're actually in open water. It's very different. So as the summer kind of approached, I was able to go out to like Sea Point, and there's, as you said, there's buoys that you're swimming along, and getting that open water feeling, which is a very different. It's a very different experience than swimming in a pool. And that's why I wanted to obviously do the triathlons, because when you're doing the swim, it's everybody would start at the same time, and so like people are swimming around you. It's kind of chaotic at the start. There's elbows flying. It's a very, you have to be very comfortable and confident that you're a good swimmer and not panic almost, because that can happen. So it's trying to replicate all those scenarios, and but that's why I wanted to do the triathlons. But so it was a mixture between, I suppose, pool and open water as part of the training.
Before, I just have a question on nutrition. Like a lot of people, like when you break it down bite size, maybe not a triathlon, but like say for training for a marathon or a half marathon, they could possibly do it, but they might not be aware of the nutrition. Like, did you kind of follow a plan, or did you kind of try and do it yourself, or how did you go about nutrition? Because obviously if you have a 24-week plan, there's no point doing that and then eating bad food. Like, so how did you work that in terms of knowing the amount of water you need to have, etc., and all protein and all that?
In honesty, when I was looking like at the nutrition, I didn't put as much emphasis and focus on it than I probably should have, in honesty. But in very simple terms, it's calories in versus calories out. So obviously you're burning so many calories, particularly on the bike. You're burning thousands of calories, so you have to be able to replace that. Otherwise you're just kind of fading away almost. So it's as actual race day, and there's a lot of nutrition that you put in place. So there's a product called Tailwind, which is essentially like a carbohydrate mix that you that would have a certain amount of calories that you can take on the bike. But like day to day, I'd be fairly balanced diet anyway. I wouldn't be eating a lot of crap, and you have to kind of as part of that, you have to kind of knock drink on the head and all that kind of stuff as part of the training. And it was just making sure I didn't think about it too much. If I focused in on it more, I probably would have got more out of the race 100%. And it's definitely a learning that I've taken forward, and I'm constantly learning about it. But it's maintaining a healthy, balanced diet is really important. And then on race day, your calories that you're burning, and the electrolytes and the hydration is obviously really important. But still lots to learn about the nutrition side. But I think I did okay.
Moving on, so obviously when you're training for an Ironman, you have the goals, and that might drive you on. But I've always wondered with people like yourself, Carl, that especially during lockdown, for example, where you might not have had stuff to train for, or even I know there was a few weeks period there recently where you had nothing to train for, but yet you were still training away. Is that just a case of building these habits that you're training at least 3, 4, 5 times a week, constantly putting stuff on Strava? But like, because I always thought initially when you're training, you need something to aim at, like a goal. But the likes of yourselves and Ryan, who will have on soon, that you seem that when you're not training, it's just the habits you're building more than necessarily the goals, I guess.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it's definitely a habit, and an addiction, really, because you're used to that feeling, particularly after running. You just feel great, and I'm a huge advocate for how you feel after a run. It's definitely a lifestyle choice. Just having that goal there is obviously really important, and I love the kind of the competition or the goal, having something to shoot for. However, like, I'm happy enough to just keep training, because I know the feeling I get from running, and how it, I suppose, adds to every part of my life. It improves my overall kind of mental health, my well-being. Obviously keeps me healthy. So it's definitely something that I've grown to really enjoy. And then again, I've just built it into my everyday. But certainly having a goal to shoot for is something that, on days where you just don't want to go out and run or cycle or swim, that having that goal there is definitely something that forces you to do that. Whereas on certain days, if you don't have a goal, you can almost be, there's a tendency to say, look, I'll do it again tomorrow. But but those are the days where you have to train, because you have to get over that mental barrier of just whether it's getting up at 6 a.m. to go for a run or cycle or whatever it may be. That's really important to just get over that hurdle, because that's also the hardest part. And then once you're on the road, then you're off and you're not thinking about it, but just getting out of bed is sometimes be the toughest bit. But yeah, just kind of I've built up really good healthy habits, I think, off the back of the triathlons, and I'm just I'm really enjoying it. And as part of lockdown, and it's definitely something that obviously we've seen like a lot of people like doing the 5K runs, and it really is great to see. And it's I'm a huge advocate for how running makes you feel, and kind of the importance of sport in general, but particularly running, because I think it's just so important.
So what would you say to someone who's been doing a few 5Ks, is kind of half thinking of, maybe kind of taking that step? Would you have any advice in terms of, on those bad days when you're like, and I've been there during lockdown where, you know what, I'm all right. I did it 3 days ago. I'll be fine to do it next week. And, you just kick the can down the road. Like for someone like me, for example, how would you, any one bit of advice or something that would, focus the mind? I know it's a hard thing to ask in a general question, but just in terms of what tips you'd kind of give to people out there, if anyone's listening that's in that kind of similar boat, that maybe is half thinking of doing something, should they commit to a race early and have that as a goal, or small steps? What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think everyone's different, and everyone's doing it for their own reasons. But I think for me anyway, it's set yourself a big goal, something that, and it doesn't can be anything, depending on where you're coming from. You might have ran a kilometer and you wanted to run 10K, but it's about, I suppose, maybe setting yourself a goal that you don't think that you can achieve, and maybe what isn't expected of you, quote unquote. So I think it's really important to set something that, look, I'm going to try and push the boundaries a bit, and challenge myself in ways where, you haven't pushed yourself before, and it's a really rewarding experience, to do something that you didn't think you could have done, maybe 6 or 7 weeks or whatever the time frame is, and that's a hugely gratifying feeling. So yeah, look, I think for people who are kind of getting into running, it's just enjoy it, enjoy the feeling, and I would say, for me anyway, this is the way my brain works, is that having that goal is something to to shoot for, can definitely motivate you more on days where you just don't want to do it. And just keep going. What I would say, and yeah, it's great to see though everyone kind of really getting stuck in, and forming those kind of healthy habits.
Brilliant, Carl. You've been excellent with your time. We're just going to do a quick fire round. Now this has turned into the not so quick fire round, Reece, so don't be afraid of speaking a few sentences. No problem there at all. What you got written there here? Yeah. So first question. So this might be, it's a tough question to ask. Would you take the knee injuries all back to still be maybe playing football, full time? I know it's a kind of tricky question. Or because of what you've achieved that you may not have achieved because of the injuries, is that something that it's part of your life now and you're delighted it happened, or not? Not delighted, but that's not a bad way of phrasing.
Yeah, no. Look, I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason, 100%, and I'm a believer that that particular injury happened, and would I be the person that I am today if I didn't have those injuries? Probably not. So you have to just focus on, that happened, and as a result of that, a lot of good things and a lot of not so good things happened. And of course, I'd love to be still playing football. I'd love to be. I would love to be playing football for the next 10, 15 years, 100%. But it is what it is, and you take out from the situation as what happened. Would I be working where I am? Would I be doing what I'm doing now if that didn't happen? I think a lot of it stems back to that, and on the lessons I've learned going through that rehab process, and going through that kind of mental step change almost. So no, look, I'm a believer that everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, brilliant answer. Would you have any? Start with maybe future goals, but would you have something wild that you've looked at? Because I know, like yourself, you've definitely looked at some. If you're looking at Ironmans, yeah, without even hardly training before, a couple of years back, you're definitely looking at something really ambitious. Now, you've already achieved a lot of stuff. Have you got a crazy goal in the next 5-10 years? Anything in mind that you might half interested in doing or entering?
Yeah, so I want to keep up I want to do another Ironman, because when you do one, obviously, can I beat my time, or I want to do it in different countries. So I want to do the Cork Ironman this time or next year, and so I'm actually registered for that. But beyond that, I'm probably going to try and rope Ryan Murphy into this, because he'd probably be up for the Marathon de Sable, which is it's a marathon across a desert. If you look it up, it's a crazy thing, and actually one of the guys from work has done it. And there's a guy on Instagram called Damien Brown, who's basically an adventurer, and he's done a lot of really amazing things. But something like that would be cool. And like when I speak about Damien, he's like rode across the Atlantic on his own, which is like things like that are like just amazing, to do something like that. Now I don't think I'm going to do that, but Marathon de Sable is definitely something that could be something to do. Another guy I think I spoke about before is Ross Edgley. He swam around the coast of Great Britain, the Great British Swim. It's something that you should check out. It's really cool. But I just love hearing these stories and just going beyond what is expected of you. You're kind of swimming in your lane, or this is what you're doing. This is what you're defined as. It's like, no, I want to try these crazy things, or it doesn't have to be an Ironman. It can be anything, but definitely, kind of shoot for the stars type of thing. I'm a big believer for that.
Who's your favorite sports person of all time?
It's a great question. Can I give you three, or does it have to be one?
I guarantee I'm going to write the two down here, but I definitely know two of your three. But go on, give us three.
I'm a huge Tiger Woods fan. People on Instagram probably I post it like whenever he's doing really cool things, and just his comeback from injury was, I think, the greatest sporting comeback of all time, in my opinion. So Tiger Woods, 100%. From an Irish point of view, and like Padraig Harrington would definitely be up there, as a sport hero, from an Irish point of view, and like I'm a huge Man United fan and football, so like I'm a huge Roy Keane fan. I think from a football point of view, I'm not a huge fan of his kind of punditry, but I think his just what he achieved in football is amazing, and his whole mentality again is just a real winner, in my opinion. So I suppose those would be my top three.
For people that want to get into endurance form, any good books, even purely from mindset, maybe your three favorite books, or your three recommendations for anyone that might just want to buy one and give it a read. Because
I'm more of a kind of a podcast / audible person, but one of the books that I've read recently was Ross Edgley brought out a book called The Art of Resilience. It's basically detailing all around his Great British Swim, and this whole idea of resilience is something that you build up, and it's a really fascinating read. So that would be one that I've read recently. From a sporting point of view, I think any of the Bob Rotella books. I think it's Bob Rotella. He's a golfing psychologist, sports psychologist, and he would have worked with the likes of Padraig Harrington and a lot of top pro golfers. And he has a series of books. I think it's Putting Out of Your Mind, or there's a couple of them that I've read. Really, really great insight into, as a golfer, how you focus, because as we know, like, golf is such a mental game, and it's something that I'd highly recommend to anyone that you don't even have to be a golfer. It's just how he approaches the sport is really interesting. So those series of books, and then the Ross Edgley book is something I've read recently. So yeah.
And one word answers for the last couple. So this is from Aaron. He wants to know, are you joining the Jers Hurlers? Because you haven't got back to him.
I saw the picture actually put up recently of the team. No, I won't. I'll happily watch, but no, I'll happily watch yourselves play. No.
Yeah, I told him like there's no chance Carl's coming back. He's you know he's got he's doing his races, and Aaron's like, no, I might get him back. I might get him. And if you had to give up one, this is a very tough question and put you on the spot. Karate or golf? What would you pick to keep up? Because I know they're probably different because you're probably playing a lot more golf, I guess. But you have a black belt in karate. How do you compare the two, and what would you pick if you only could play one or do one for the rest of your life?
Yeah, definitely golf, because I think golf is something that you can play right up till you're able to, really, like, it's such it's a great social sport. Karate is something that it's obviously it's individual and it's a bit more niche, but I enjoy both in a lot of different ways. But golf is something I think you can sustain that for so much longer than karate, unfortunately. But yeah, and I enjoy playing, so it'll have to be golf. Keep that going.
Brilliant, Kyle. You've been excellent with your time. Thanks so much for coming on, and stay where you are now because we're going to get Ryan to join the call.
Cool, thanks, lads.
Cheers. So if we pause that.
Does it sound okay?
Sounds good. Yeah.
I'm delighted to welcome now Carl's new partner in crime, Ryan Murphy. Ryan, welcome to the podcast. How are we?
How's it going, lads? Nice to be here.
Ryan, I brought you on firstly to talk about, like, we all knew Carl was doing the Ironman. Like, I was delighted for him and everything, but it never crossed my mind to kind of pretty much join in with him afterwards. What made you do that?
No, certainly not something to follow the feet of Carl. But I suppose, yeah, I was playing football with Cabinteely in now the Jers for a couple of years, and I picked up a bad hamstring injury in 2018. And it was the year Carl decided to do the Ironman, and I just decided, straight line running, cycling, no impact, swimming, also no impact. I might give this a go. And of course, I hadn't swam since about, I don't know, maybe since about 6th class in primary school. Gave that a go, wasn't bad at it. And then eventually, I started, working on my weaknesses, and came together. And myself and Carl did a Olympic distance in summer last year. And ever since, I've been the head down training for it. It's been great.
And then so you guys were planning to go to do an Ironman 70-30 or 73 in Marbella, wasn't it?
Yeah, so 70.3 Marbella Ironman was the peak of this season for myself anyway, and Carl. So we were planning to go in April, gone, and of course coronavirus shut that one down on us. But it is now rescheduled for October 25th, and that is still tentative as well, whether we can go or not, but we're still hoping to get there.
And you're going over to raise money for the Support for Drumo campaign. Maybe tell us a bit about that and why you got involved in it.
Yeah, so we probably booked it, Carl, in just before Christmas in December, and we when you do these type of events, you realize the milestone that you're creating. It's not overly common, so we decided there's a good opportunity here to potentially raise money for a charity or something even more close to the home local, like the Sport for Drumo. And I think it was over Christmas pint, something like that, myself and Carl decided that story is really touching. We connected with it. We know friends of Sean's close network. We said, this story is phenomenal. The group of lads that are behind this, we should row in behind them here. And we decided to message the Instagram group, very, very basic formality on it, and said, look, we would like to raise potential funds for the Sport for Drumo for our Ironman.
And then, yeah, from that, obviously, so you'd raised a lot of money for the Marbella race, and then obviously it didn't go ahead. So tell us about your motivation. Obviously, you really wanted to do it. To raise even more money, you decided to do a lockdown triathlon, for want of a better, or Ironman, sorry, for want of a better description.
Yeah, I suppose regards to that, it probably got more publicity than it would have if we were to go over. We had massive support here at home. There was an article done in the Mirror and everything, and then it also got put onto the Times or the Indo even. And like, as I said, we wouldn't have got that much publicity over there. So we decided to honor anyone who donated before the race had cancelled. And we said, okay, look, we'll do something at home. And at the time, it was a 2 kilometer radius, and we wanted to be fairly strict on that. So we substituted the swim with a 3K run, did the 90K bike, half marathon within 2 kilometers in our local parks. And yeah, over the course of the weekend, we asked people to run 5 kilometers with us, and we raised 10 plus grand over that weekend.
Wow, because myself and Sean got involved with the 5K runs, and I guess doing it locally, you know, and I think you guys mentioned that you met some of the runners on the way, you know, or I know, Carl, you did on the bike, but yeah, so I suppose being that local, getting everyone out, it kind of drove the campaign and yourselves to motivate you on, particularly because that was your first time doing the Ironman.
I'd never done a distance like that. I remember running down the road towards Caboga Park, anyone who doesn't know, and there was a couple of people beeping horns at me. Now, I was in the white t-shirt with the Sport for Drummo, and I think everyone was saying, there's your man, you know, what's he doing? And I saw there was a group of Cooler Ladies team out as well. They were running around Caboga Park, and I got a few waves. It was great. Like, it was a real moment that, you know, they showed the community in the area, but not only that, sport, how sport brought so many people together for a really appropriate cause in a global pandemic.
It's probably harder, and Carl, I'll bring you in on it as well, to do the run and the cycle all within your own 2K, and it just feels like you're doing laps of yourself. For a mental side, is it easier to do, kind of break it down into 10K loops or 2K loops, or what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's like, as Ryan said, like, it's within a 2K radius, and so I didn't do the bike on a like a standing, or what's the name? Sorry, turbo trainer. Sorry, excuse me. So I did it like loops around O'Leary, and that, yeah, like 90 within a 2K radius is, you know, you're just doing kind of loops, and yeah, definitely mentally kind of testing, and kind of boring in a lot of ways, and any like triathlon that Ryan and I would have done, and any triathlon, you have a bit of a buzz of a crowd around you, and it's a lot easier to kind of keep going. Whereas when you're on your own, it's just you versus you type of thing, and there's no crowd, you know, there's no kind of aid stations as well, which is a huge thing, particularly on the run, which I know I got completely wrong. Ryan absolutely smoked me. He did an amazing time, but I think that's really difficult, particularly when you come off the 90K into the bike, or into the run. The nutrition is very important, and yeah, and I like, in the situation that we're in now, even if we do the Ironman in Marbella in October, I don't know what the situation will be, given, you know, the pandemic, you know, whether there be crowds, probably not. So it's a very different feeling, and a lot tougher, in my opinion.
Yeah, Ryan, just on that, is it competitive between the two of you at all now going into Marbella?
No, but I remember when I got off the bike, I was like, I wonder where he's at, because we weren't in contact at all. So I was like, I wonder if Carl's off the bike, or if he's. I wonder how far behind I am, was more the way I was thinking, to be honest. But just to touch on what Carl said, like, you know, there's aid stations, you know, every 30K on the bike, maybe 40K on the bike. We went out with nothing, you know. We just went out, God for it, and God, we probably struggled because of that, but it's a good story now, I suppose.
And then that last thing on that, so right now you're training for the Marbella Ironman, the 2 years. Yeah. You're obviously training separately, but you probably meet up the odd time for cycles, I guess. Sorry, that's for Ryan. Yeah, go on.
We meet up for a long cycle every now and then. I've been probably touching away a little bit. I'm actually training for a big cycle across the country now next week's time. So myself and Carl would be head down for, you know, the goods of since January last, you know, every weekend, getting out for a 4-hour bike and a run after. So train a good bit hand in hand, yeah. And
then the last thing on that, so we're going to link the Support for Drummo campaign in the description. But Ryan, you mentioned the cycle you're going to do this weekend. Can you just tell us a little bit about the charity involved there? We'll also link that in the description too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So a son of mine, Donald Gray, his son, Logan, has been diagnosed with a cancer, and me and a group of friends have decided to cycle coast to coast from Sandy Mountain, Dublin, to Lahinch on the west coast of Ireland in one day. The route is about 268 kilometers for my sins. I've never done anything more than 145 in one sitting. So this will be a massive test to all of us, anyone who's coming on the day. So the plan is to get it done in one day, leave 5 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, it's going to be a long day on the bike in the saddle.
At least you end up in a nice part of Ireland anyway.
I do if it's not raining, Sean.
Listen, Ryan, thanks for coming on podcast. As I said, for guys that if you want to look at the episode description there, we'll have the support for Jungle Campaign and in the description. But guys, Ryan and Carl, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks, lads.
Thanks, lads. Cheers.
Cheers.